What is a weird childhood memory you have that you don't know whether it's true or not? My brother managed to get his head stuck in the scrollwork of an ironwood banister at a hotel, and in the ensuing panic I wandered off to this wonderful place where there was a table full of cookies and candy. As I'm eating the cookies and the candy and whatever I can find, some really angry adult yells at me, picks me up and carries me out of this amazing room filled with sweets. I was about 3 or 4 years old. I think I crashed a wedding or a bar mitzvah's dessert table while my brother was being extracted from the banister. It was amazing. My parents claim it never happened. I remember when my mom was having a baby, my grandma took care of me when I was sick at the same time. My stomach hurt and I was throwing up when she grabbed a bottle of Pepto-Bismol and made me drink about 60% of the bottle. I then threw up pink and that scarred me so much that I throw up every time I drink Pepto-Bismol. I vividly remember going to see my dad in hospital after he had been in a car accident. I remember the bruises on his chest from the seatbelt and his old school hairstyle. He had a hip to ankle cast as he had broken his leg in 3 places, and I remember that leg wasn't covered by the blanket so I could see the cast. My mum was actually pregnant with me when this happened, so there's no chance I could remember it. However, I'm convinced my mum has got her dates wrong. There was an old couple who lived on the other side of my backyard fence. They had grandkids who were a bit older than me or younger than me, so we weren't friends. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I met a kid who was visiting them across the fence. He told me they were his grandparents and I would talk with him through the fence. It was awkward and we would mostly just sit there and play with our own toys in silence or just look at each other for hours. A lot like the 2 kids and the boy in the striped pajamas. His name was Brian, and every time I played with him his grandfather would give me a weird look. We moved cities shortly after, and years later I brought it up with my brothers and my mom, and they don't remember the neighbors having a grandkid my age. They remember the older kids and the younger ones, but not anyone my age. They don't remember me ever playing with anyone out there. They don't remember anything about it at all. It still freaks me out to think about that. I remember when I was a child there was this fountain in my city that had some kind of spikes at the bottom, some elements of a construction. And I vaguely remember that once my mom and I were passing by the fountain and there was no water in it, but there was a man lying there in a puddle of blood, pierced by the spikes as if he had fallen on them accidentally, and my mom was like, "Oh, let's go now." I asked her about it when I got older and she said, "What? This never happened." I guess she wouldn't lie about it and it's not something she'd just forget. So maybe it never happened. Indeed. Not sure why I remember this though. I clearly remember my mom telling me as a kid that if I put vegetables in the freezer, they turn into ice cream. I told her now years later how it was a funny joke, but she swears she has never said it. I woke up from a bad dream and went to go sleep with my parents. On the way to their bedroom I had to pass the front door, which had a big window next to it. 2 guys were trying to break in, and when they saw me, they knocked on the window to get my attention and motioned for me to unlock the door. My mom said it was a dream, but to this day, the image of those 2 guys at our front window is as real as any childhood memory I have. This happened over 40 years ago. I remember vomiting all over the backseat of the family car and spending the remainder of the road trip to my uncle's house sitting in the car in just my underwear. One time when I was about 5, I was in the backseat of my mom's car and saw a huge black rain cloud right over us. It looked extraterrestrial, or like it could be in a movie about the apocalypse or something. It was probably just a normal cloud, but the image of it stuck with me and I think about it every so often. I have a memory from when I was young enough to be in a crib. I remember my mom putting me down and I was scared and teething. So I grinned my teeth on my wood crib and I remember that feeling still. The wood was so soft it felt amazing. Lol. After that I remember laying down on my stomach and falling asleep right away. I had to have been about 1, so I feel like how could I remember something from that long ago? But on the other hand, my mom said me and one of my brothers used to bite the crib a lot. One time when I was about 8, we were at a relative's cabin and I went to go tell my dad it was lunchtime when I saw him standing stock still in the river. I called out to him and he just slowly motioned for me to be quiet. I watched him standing there, looking into the water for maybe a full minute before he lurched into the water and snatched up an enormous carp. I just watched my dad hold on to this giant, glistening carp for several seconds before he threw it back into the river and waded out of the river like nothing happened. He didn't say anything about it when we got back to the cabin and we've never talked about it. I could ask him about it now, I suppose, but there's something magical or surreal about the fact that it was never spoken of again. I was a very young boy when the incident happened. I was at a family friend's house, playing with their 2 kids in a paddling pool on a summer's day. I was young enough that I didn't have swimming shorts, but going naked wasn't a big deal, so probably anywhere up to perhaps 5-6 years old. I had a stonking hard on the whole time. I remember the mum coming out asking if I wanted to perhaps borrow some shorts, and I just told her that I was fine without. So I'm there splish splashing around in all my wooden glory for probably like an hour. I have zero interest in verifying with the mother whether that happened or not. We used to live in an old farmhouse with a very steep long staircase right next to my room. When I was about 2 or 3 I fell down the stairs. I still remember it because it felt like I was falling in slow motion. I lost my balance, started to fall and tried to grip part of the banister going down again and again but couldn't hold on to it. Through the banister I could see my mom's shocked face in the dining room and her jumping up. All still slowed down. When I reached the bottom I slammed against the front door and just kinda lay there and saw my mom running down the stairs towards me. Time sped up again. I know it happened but I still remember falling so clearly it seems weird. My mom told me I kept saying I couldn't hold on in between crying. I went into the kitchen one morning when I was like 11 and looked out the window to the fence to see a squirrel with a mini Hershey's bar in hand with just enough wrapper peeled down you could read Hershey still and munching on it like a human. I thought it was hilarious at the time but also knew that's probably going to kill you. I never found out what happened to that squirrel. Okay, here I go. There was a cornucopia on the fruit of the loom logo. At this point I am convinced that it didn't exist though. There is enough proof for me to understand that it wasn't there, but it is arguably the only Mandela effect that has no real rationalization explanation. Before you crucify me, this thread has the most proof that it didn't exist. That when I was about 10 I was at my auntie and uncle's house in Sydney for Christmas and my cousin who's a hairdresser perfectly straightened my crazily curly long hair, which takes over an hour. One of my presents that morning was new pyjamas and I put them on and went to walk out into the garden to show my mum my new pyjamas and tripped and fell into their pool, soaking my new PJs and ruining my perfectly straight hair. To my cousin's dismay, I literally have such a vivid memory of it happening but I brought it up to my mum once and she doesn't remember it, so I have always questioned myself. I have a vague memory of me and my twin brother being visited by the bicho papao, a creature that visits naughty children in Brazilian and Portuguese culture, when we were very young. Pretty sure a creature like that is not exclusive from my culture. Anyways, the freaky part is that my brother also had the same memory. To this day we don't know if it was real or not, but if it was, maybe it was somebody trying to play a prank on us, since we were naughty children indeed. I remember talking to one of my friends in primary school who mentioned he'd been abducted by aliens. I've asked him a few years ago and he doesn't remember having that happen at all, or mentioning it to me. My very first vivid memory is false. I got a shape sorter for Christmas. When my parents left the living room, my older brother walked over, picked up a block, and threw it in the fire. I was reminding my mum about this in my early 20s and she laughed. We didn't have an open fire, and my older brother couldn't walk yet. I still think he did it. In the UK we used to have a TV show called TV Live in the Morning on Saturdays presented by Anton Deck and Kat Deely. Still a smoking hottie by the way. One day the 1st of April happened to be a Saturday. Deck goes really woozy while presenting and faints. Everyone is like oh god, cut to adverts, which it does. It then comes back and he is fine and like April Fools. Kinda stupid but I cannot find footage of it and everyone I talk to doesn't remember. When I was maybe 5 or 6 I remember flipping a coin off my thumb and it rotating for longer than physically possible. Obviously it couldn't have happened, but I remember it clearly. Me at the age of about 5 or 6, I'm play fighting with my dad and at some point I end up sitting on his face and he's lying on his back. My mom made a joke like haha and now fart and I thought it was funny and farted. They sent me to my room then. I didn't get sarcasm. I'm now too embarrassed to ask if I dreamed it or not. I remember when I was 6-8 having a picture of a yellow duck on a red background that I've personally drawn. I also remember having to feed it by drawing yellow dots near the duck and I've done it multiple times too. Strange thing is that every morning yellow dots disappeared as if the duck ate them. My parents didn't know that I fed the duck so they couldn't draw over the dots. And I remember seeing same picture without the dots much later, in my teens. Still don't know if that was my imagination or some strange reaction with the paint. I remember playing badminton in the house with my sister. At one shot, I had to back up quite a bit to get it. I tripped and fell backwards and hit my head. I dreamt of myself riding a bicycle and then when I came to, my legs were in the air like I was riding a bicycle. My sister says that never happened. I stepped on a roofing nail and got a huge hole in my foot that I had to soak nightly for a month. My mom said it didn't happen, but my dad and sister say it did happen. When I was around 5 or 6 years old I remember walking outside on a cloudy day and seeing it raining at my neighbor's house across the street but not raining at mine. That's the first time it ever occurred to me it doesn't rain everywhere when it rains at my house. I think this story was true, but maybe it's not. Memory is weird. When I was 10 I was at a circus with my family. We were really close to the show just at the edge of the ring. At one point during the elephant show the elephant sneezed on me. It got all over my shoulder and neck. I started freaking out while my family just laughed at me. I ran to the porta potty crying all macho and totally not crying to clean up and walked in on a woman breastfeeding in there. She screamed and I was crying not at all crying. Once she realized I was a small child macho manly man, she tucked herself back in and helped me clean up. I was crying totally not crying the whole time and she was wiping up elephant snot with one hand and cradling a baby with another. She is probably still wondering to this day what I was covered in because I didn't say a word to her the whole time. When she was done I ran away and made my parents take me home. I was flipping channels on our TV and discovered this awesome show called Candle Cove. It had pirates and skeletons. Some of my friends saw it, but my mom said I was making it up. My mom waited outside a bathroom for me at JCPenney's one time while I went in. I was 4 or 5 years old. There was a guy in there while I was at the urinal but nothing seemed unusual about the memory of it other than it being unusual that I would remember something so mundane. That is until I was 34 and the rest of the memory slowly filtered back. I started remembering that the guy had touched my D while I stood at the urinal. Even writing this now I wouldn't bet my soul that it happened because surely it would be more clear than that. But then again, why would I start remembering that at all? Duck, I don't know. I am maybe 4 years old. I follow my sister up the outside stairs of our apartment building to where a man is sitting on the top step. He is cleaning a handgun and I don't know him, so I am afraid. My sister chatters away about the gun. How does it work? What's that part for? Can I hold it? I'm frozen. I want to not be here, but I don't know what to do. I have to wait for my sister. She's the oldest. She should know. The man gets up, puts the gun inside his jacket, and looks at me. That's all I remember. I have no idea if this happened or if it was a dream, but the memory doesn't feel like a dream. My sister doesn't remember it at all, so it must have been a dream, right? I'm telling ya, this is true. I was at home with some cousins over for lunch. We were sitting in our living room which was in sight of the front door and front gate. Beyond that, I saw a newlywed couple go up to our gate, the man opening it for his bride very nicely, and walked up and into our house. My aunt went up and explained that this is our house, and they walked off. No one who was there has any memory of this event, but it is very vivid in my mind. I hear this is actually impossible to remember, but I recall, in vivid detail, my daycare teacher asking me how old I was and me just lifting up 3 fingers to her. I was about 7 years old when this happened. My grandma took me on a walk with her friend and right when we were crossing a bridge, a shark jumped from the water and ate my grandma's friend. I never gave this much thought until some years ago. When I remembered this and thought how ridiculous it was. The thing is, I never saw my grandma's friend again. I remember waking up early on a Saturday morning when I was 4 or 5. I walked out to the big area behind our backyard and saw a hot air balloon taking off. The rest of my family says it was impossible. I remember seeing my mom having sex with some guy that I had never seen before downstairs in the kitchen. It was nighttime and I was asleep in my room upstairs. But I woke up after hearing my mom making strange noises downstairs. I thought she was hurt because it sounded like a mixture of pain and something else. I went downstairs to go check on her and see if I could help her get to bed. When I went downstairs, however, I didn't see her on the couch. So I went to the kitchen. There, I saw a man having sex with my mom from behind right in front of the sink. I remember in detail his naked butt, back, and skin. I was so terrified. I ran back upstairs and hid under the covers. Definitely can't talk to her about that to confirm lol. One of those pools that were tall enough to go up to a kid's waist or so but be underwater if you got on all fours. I vividly remember some kid holding my back down so I couldn't stand up and breathe until I had crawled all the way around the pool. Thing is, I don't recall ever owning a pool like that or how I would have known that I'd be lit up. This is one of my most vivid childhood memories and I just accepted it as true until recently when I gave it an extra mull over. IDK if it was a dream or what honestly. There was a worm caterpillar thing on my tricycle and I remembered being told they can be poisonous and not to touch them. My parents were telling me to get onto my tricycle so I was telling them no. There's a caterpillar on there. My dad's asking me where and I'm screaming crying that it's near the handles. My parents are telling me there's nothing there and make me get onto my tricycle despite me screaming. The caterpillar then crawls onto my hand and eats through the fleshy part between my fingers and thumb on my left hand. This obviously didn't happen but until I really thought about it I just remember that bit as where the worm ate through each time I looked at my hand. If I was screaming beforehand, I was definitely screaming after. I remember my parents not being able to see it and telling me nothing happened but eventually I got my dad to put some TCP on it.